The city of Chicago always seemed to wake up before the sun. On this particular Monday morning, the sidewalks were packed with hurried footsteps, the sound of car horns filled the air, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted from every corner cafe. People moved quickly, eyes glued to phones, briefcases in hand, rushing to make it to work on time. The world felt loud, fast, and indifferent. Among this sea of strangers was Emily Carter, a 28-year-old nurse. Her brown hair was tied back in a messy bun, and her uniform peeked out from beneath her heavy winter coat. She carried her usual coffee cup in one hand, but her other hand gripped the strap of her bag tightly, as though it were holding her together. Her body was tired from pulling back-to-back night shifts, but her heart still held a softness that long hours of work hadn't been able to harden. As Emily crossed the street toward the hospital bus stop, something caught her eye. An elderly man sat slouched on a weathered wooden bench. His gray hair stuck out in different directions, his coat was far too thin for the winter chill, and his shoes had holes in the soles. In the blur of the morning rush, he was nearly invisible. Hundreds of people passed by, glancing at him briefly, then quickly looking away. Emily slowed her steps. Something inside her stirred. It wasn't pity, it was concern, the kind of concern that rises naturally when you truly notice another human being. She paused in front of the man, her breath forming little clouds in the freezing air. "Good morning, sir," she said gently, her voice warm but cautious. "Are you doing okay?" The man lifted his head slowly, almost startled. His eyes were pale blue, tired but not unkind. For a moment, it seemed like he didn't know how to respond. His lips parted, then closed again, as if he had forgotten the simple rhythm of conversation. Finally, he gave a small nod. "I've been better," he admitted softly, his voice raspy from disuse. Emily's smile spread across her face, sincere and unforced. "It looks pretty cold out here. Have you had anything warm to eat this morning?" He shook his head, but then something remarkable happened. His lips curved into a faint, hesitant smile, fragile, but real. That one small gesture held so much weight. It wasn't just a smile, it was a response to being seen, acknowledged, treated with dignity. Emily felt her chest tighten. The city noise seemed to fade into the background. In that instant, there were no rushing crowds, no honking cars, just two people sharing a moment of simple humanity on a busy street corner. That single smile reminded Emily why she had chosen to become a nurse in the first place, to care, to connect, and to remind people that they mattered. She didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of something far more powerful than just a morning encounter. Emily glanced at her watch. She still had nearly 20 minutes before she needed to clock in at the hospital. Most mornings, she would have hurried inside to grab a quick bite before her shift began. But today felt different. The old man's tired smile lingered in her thoughts, tugging at her heart. She looked back at him. His coat sleeves were frayed, and his hands trembled slightly as he rubbed them together for warmth. Without overthinking it, she asked, "Would you like a cup of coffee? There's a cafe just around the corner." At first, the man seemed unsure. His brows furrowed, and he glanced at the busy street as though he didn't want to inconvenience her. But Emily's smile was steady, patient. Finally, he gave a small nod. "That would be nice," he whispered. Together they walked to a small coffee shop nearby. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and warm air filled with the scent of roasted beans. Wrapped around them, most of the tables were filled with office workers typing away on laptops or talking on their phones. Emily led the man to a corner table near the window. She ordered 2 hot coffees and a blueberry muffin, setting them on the table between them. The man's eyes widened slightly as he wrapped his hands around the steaming cup. He held it carefully, almost reverently, as if it were something rare and precious. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You're welcome," Emily said warmly. "I'm Emily, by the way." The man hesitated before answering. "Mr. Johnson," he said quietly. "At least, that's what my students used to call me." Emily tilted her head curiously. "Students?" He nodded slowly, a hint of pride shining through his weariness. "I used to teach history at a high school. Spent over 30 years in the classroom. I loved it, loved watching kids grow, seeing their eyes light up when they understood something new. But life doesn't always turn out the way you think it will." Emily leaned in, listening closely. She didn't interrupt, didn't glance at her phone, didn't rush him. She just listened. Mr. Johnson told her about his wife, how she had passed away 5 years earlier. He shared how he'd tried to keep working after retirement, but health issues and bills had piled up. Eventually, he lost his home. His family lived far away, and he hadn't wanted to be a burden. Now, the bench outside the bus stop was where he spent most of his days. As he spoke, his voice softened. The walls around him seemed to fall away, replaced by something fragile but honest. "You know," he said, lifting his eyes to hers, "it's been a long time since anyone asked me how I was doing. People walk past every day, and I don't blame them. Everyone's busy. But you stopped. You gave me more than coffee today. You gave me a reason to feel seen." Emily's throat tightened, her eyes stinging with emotion. She hadn't done anything extraordinary. She had only offered kindness. Yet, sitting there in that small cafe, she realized it was often the simplest gestures that carried the greatest weight. For the first time in years, Mr. Johnson smiled fully, genuine, warm, and alive. And Emily felt her own heart light up in return. The rest of Emily's day at the hospital moved quickly. She attended to patients, checked charts, and hurried down long hallways filled with the beeping of machines and the murmur of voices. Yet, no matter how busy things became, her mind often drifted back to Mr. Johnson. She thought of his fragile smile, the way his eyes lit up when he felt noticed, and how something so simple had carried such power. That evening, during her break in the staff lounge, Emily shared the story with a couple of her colleagues. She didn't mean to make it a big deal, she just wanted to tell them about the man she had met that morning. But as she described his old coat, his trembling hands, and the quiet gratitude in his smile, her coworkers stopped scrolling their phones and leaned in. "You bought him coffee? Just like that?" one nurse asked, her eyebrows raised in surprise. Emily shrugged. It didn't feel like a big thing. He just needed kindness. And honestly, it made my day better too. Her friend Mark, another nurse, smiled thoughtfully. "You know, sometimes we get so focused on the big things, saving lives, completing procedures, that we forget how powerful the little things can be. A smile, a kind word, it matters." The conversation sparked something in the room. Over the next few days, Emily noticed her coworkers making small changes. One nurse brought an extra sandwich for the security guard on night duty. Another spent extra time with a lonely elderly patient, chatting with her instead of rushing out. Even Mark began keeping granola bars in his bag to give to the homeless people he passed on his commute. It was as if Mr. Johnson's smile had traveled beyond that cafe table, carried forward by Emily, and now spreading through her circle like ripples in water. A week later, Emily saw Mr. Johnson again at the bus stop. But this time, he wasn't hunched in silence. He was sitting upright, smiling warmly as he greeted people passing by. Some glanced at him suspiciously, unsure of why a stranger would acknowledge them. But a few smiled back. One woman even stopped to ask how his morning was going. Emily stood across the street for a moment, watching, her heart swelling with quiet pride. She didn't want to interrupt. This wasn't about her anymore, it was about him, about the spark of hope he now carried and shared. Later that day, as she walked into the hospital, Emily reflected on how one small moment could ripple outward. She hadn't solved all of Mr. Johnson's problems. She hadn't fixed the world. But she had reminded one person that he mattered, and that reminder was already touching others. She realized something powerful: kindness doesn't stop with the person who receives it. It continues. It grows. It spreads to places you may never see. And sometimes, all it takes to start that ripple is one smile. 2 weeks later, the hospital lobby buzzed with its usual energy. Patients filled the waiting area, stretchers rolled by, and the sound of phones ringing echoed down the hallways. Emily had just clocked in for her night shift when she noticed a familiar figure sitting on one of the patient beds in the emergency room. Her breath caught. Mr. Johnson. Fear shot through her chest. Was he sick? Hurt? She hurried across the room, her heart racing faster with every step. "Mr. Johnson," she asked, her voice trembling. "What happened? Are you okay?" The old man looked up and broke into a gentle smile. His face looked healthier, his eyes brighter than the last time she had seen him. "Don't worry, Emily," he said calmly. "I'm not here because something's wrong. I just came in for a basic checkup. And, well," his smile deepened, I wanted to see you." Relief washed over Emily like a wave. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding and sat down in the chair beside his bed. "You scared me for a second," she admitted, laughing nervously. "I thought something had happened." He shook his head. "No, no. Quite the opposite, actually. Things are getting better. After we met, I applied for some assistance programs. It wasn't easy, but I found a shelter that helped me get back on my feet. I'm eating regularly, and I've even started volunteering at the local library. I help kids with their homework a few afternoons a week." Emily's eyes widened in delight. "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you." Mr. Johnson leaned back against the pillows, his expression thoughtful. "You know, Emily, I was ready to give up before you stopped that morning. I thought I'd become invisible, that nobody cared if I was here or not. But your smile, it gave me hope. And hope is powerful. It changes everything." Tears stung Emily's eyes. She tried to blink them away, but one slipped down her cheek anyway. She quickly wiped it, smiling through the emotion. "All I did was say hello. You're the one who had the strength to keep going." "Maybe, Mr. Johnson said softly. "But sometimes, strength needs a spark to wake it up. You gave me that spark." For a moment, the noisy hospital faded into the background. It was just the two of them, sitting there, sharing a connection that neither time nor circumstance could erase. Emily realized that the choice she had made that cold morning, to stop, to smile, to care, had created a chain reaction. She hadn't just changed Mr. Johnson's day, she had helped him change his life. And in return, he had reminded her of something she already knew deep down, that kindness, no matter how small, never goes to waste. Spring arrived in Chicago, and with it came warmer days, blossoming trees, and brighter moods. The grayness of winter seemed to fade into fresh beginnings. One Saturday afternoon, Emily was invited to a community event at the local library where volunteers were being honored for their service. She hadn't planned on going, but when she learned that Mr. Johnson would be there, she couldn't resist. The library was buzzing with families, children, and community leaders. Posters decorated the walls, celebrating education and kindness. Emily slipped into the back row of folding chairs, quietly watching as speakers took the stage. Finally, the host announced the next honoree. "Please welcome Mr. Samuel Johnson," the host said warmly, "a retired teacher who has dedicated his time to helping children in our community rediscover the joy of reading." The room erupted in applause. Emily's hands joined in, clapping proudly as Mr. Johnson walked to the podium. He looked different now, his back straighter, his face brighter, and his eyes shining with renewed purpose. The man she had once seen hunched on a bench, invisible to the world, now stood before a crowd with dignity. Mr. Johnson cleared his throat, his voice strong and steady. "I want to thank you all for this honor. But I also want to share a little truth." He paused, scanning the crowd until his gaze landed on Emily. His lips curved into a soft smile. "A few months ago, I had nothing, not a home, not hope, not even the will to keep going. I felt invisible. But then, one morning, a young woman stopped and spoke to me. She didn't give me money, she didn't make promises. She just smiled and asked if I was okay. That one act reminded me that I was still human, still worth noticing." The audience grew silent, every ear tuned to his words. "That moment," he continued, "changed the course of my life. I found strength again, and with it, I found ways to move forward. Now, I get to stand here and help children learn, just like I used to. All because one person chose kindness." Emily felt tears well in her eyes, but this time she let them fall. The applause that followed shook the room, but in her heart, the sound was even louder. After the ceremony, Mr. Johnson walked over to her. "You see, Emily," he said softly, "your smile didn't just win my heart, it gave me back my life. And now I hope to pass that gift on to others." Emily hugged him, her chest full of pride and gratitude. In that embrace, she realized the truth she would carry forever: kindness is never wasted. It multiplies, grows, and spreads far beyond what we can imagine. All it had taken was one smile to remind a broken man that he mattered. And that one smile had created ripples strong enough to change lives.